Thank you so much, Sagar and Neelika, for joining us at Mentality. We do mental health conversations every week. And this week is obviously something that almost the entire nation has been talking about, the student protests, something that you guys have been very closely involved with. And we will talk a little bit about the mental health implications, not just for students, but in general, the implications of a protest of this magnitude, specifically on younger people in the country. So great. So let's get started. Maybe I'll put the question to you. So Sagar, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the organization? Before we started the conversation, I asked you how you pronounced CHIT and what it means. So maybe we'd start with that. So tell us a bit about the organization, its name, and what it means.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. So yeah, my name is Sagar. I'm the co-founder of Citta with Neelika. And we started Citta in college. So we both are surprisingly not psychology graduates. We are actually engineering students who had gone through the ringer of the Indian education system. And we felt like there wasn't a trusted intermediary between, say, students and being able to access verified, affordable mental health professionals. And that's when we decided that we could probably take a swing at this and try and solve this issue. We pitched this idea to a conference that we had gone to in 2019 in Spain, and we got seed funding for it. And that's how we started. I've always had an affinity towards Indian names. My other organization is also called Mob, which is the Hindi word for opportunity. And Citta is my first organization. So when I'd taken Sanskrit in school. So I had a Sanskrit dictionary back at home. So I was just going through it and I was like, what does the mind mean? And it said Citta. So that's how I went to Neelika. I asked her, what does she think about the name? And she was on board. She liked the name as well. So that we stuck to that. And yeah, that's how we started. We pitched the idea. They really liked what we had to do. And ever since then, our entire objective as an organization has just been that whenever students and young people need us, we just need to be there and try and be the trusted source that they can rely on in need. And that's what we've been doing for the last 5 to 6 years, offline, online. We were there during COVID. We were there during the recent times when students felt like a lot of physical and mental anguish as well. So we decided that it was really important to be there. But yeah, that's how the journey of Citta started. And we wanted people to look at therapy as a viable, real option, which I don't think students ever considered, given they couldn't afford it, and therapy was just a inaccessible option from a price point perspective. So it was important to then show them that there are ways and means through which you can access help, and we are just now happy to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're right. I mean, therapy is not affordable to most Indians, let alone young students, who share a cup of tea because they want to save money, or you are relying on Maggie at midnight because, you can't really wake up for breakfast and things like that. So completely understand. And also, Saga, when you were talking, one of the things that came to my mind was how a lot of the innovations in different fields actually come from engineering students, because I feel like there was a wave in India where everybody did engineering, whether because of parental pressure or peer pressure or because they didn't know better. And it's only after you graduate that you kind of realize what your true calling is. But but that's great. Just to delve into these specific protests, and then we'll also talk broadly about student mental health and the work that you guys are doing. But with respect to this particular protest, what is your work been like, and what is your experience taught you?
Yeah. So I think I can just speak to the first part of the question, and then Sagar, since he was facilitating with Henna, like one of our therapists, he can take it on further. So I think overall, our goal has always been whenever there's been a crisis, like we want to make sure that we're getting the right help to the people at the right time and not, delaying that. Because I feel like anytime anything happens, be it the COVID crisis or this, like the first thing that people need is mental health support. So we like consolidate our resources, and we've set up like free helplines before. So this time what our initiative was that we did two kind of things. One was we launched a mental health support group for everyone impacted during the protest, and then the second one was providing free therapy to everyone, like who also like took part in the protest, got impacted by the protest. So that's how it was. And since we mentioned we're engineering students, we don't have the expertise. We always collaborate with qualified therapists and professionals. So we collaborated with Hanknan Institute, where they have like really good therapists, and Henna is one of the like members there. So that's how like it came to be. And then Sagar was a part of the support groups as well, so he can share like what the experience was like.
Yeah. So the initial idea about um, sort of building these free mental health resources during these protests was just for the first time, I think in a very long time, students were collectively feeling the same emotion. And given that I have been in India and I also work in education, I run an education startup. I could feel the anguish. I could feel the collective sigh that everyone was sort of having, that they were really done with the education system, and it's almost not unanimously everyone agrees that the education system needs reforms and changes, and it had just come to an emotional sort of point where it sort of broke, like it was like a tipping point for everybody. And it was important at that point, more than ever, for mental health resources to be present, because what happens is, while you're collectively trying to process this emotion through social media, through reels, and if you see, the language has been quite unserious in the way students have dealt with it, and that's a way of coping, right? Like, you're trying to cope with a serious situation by being unserious, and that's how the generation is sort of deals with this. But it was also important to show them that there are also other ways through which you can actually process these emotions, especially when you're not able to be unserious and you want to sort of feel the anguish, and it is bothering you. So that's the germ of the idea of, as to why we thought it is important to hold these spaces where people can just come and share how they've been feeling. I was a part of these session, and what happened was, surprisingly, while we had opened the support group for young people, we had people from all walks of life show up for the support group, and from different demographics. Just to keep the confidentiality of the support group, I won't get into the specifics, but I'd be happy to share the themes that were discussed in the group. And I think there was a collective sense of despair, especially because this was exactly 1 or 2 days right after, say, the Ladi charges that happened in Delhi. So there was a little bit of despair as to what is this? Like, why is this happening to kids? And these were like expressions shared by parents, the students themselves, people who couldn't be at the protests, be it in Delhi or Bombay, and just the guilt of not being able to show up for something that they feel so strongly about. And you also had this feeling of not being able to share this emotion. While there were a lot of people who were very openly sharing what they felt on social media or in places, there were also other folks who were scared to show what they were feeling, because at the risk of losing their friends or family over it, because they were like, what if they don't align with how I think about this? So and which is why such groups actually are so important, where students and individuals are able to express how they're actually feeling. And there were also very refreshing themes about hope, and the hope actually not didn't come from Gen Z, but from the older generations, where they're like, what, we actually do feel like there is something, because I think they'd become so jaded, right? Like, they felt like this is how it is, and there is nothing much we can do about it. But to see hope from the younger generation, where they're able to see, you know what, they did really take matters into their own hands and decided that they will decide what's good for them, and good on them. And uh, while they were proud of them, there was also a bit of envy. Like, why did we not do this? And why could we not sort of show up and prove ourselves, especially when we needed it? But that's essentially what, like, a brief of what happened in the support group. And it was heavy to be there because there were heavy emotions. But now that there is some, like, you see some outcome of the protest and everything, which is why I am at a reasonable position. But if you'd asked me this 1 or 2 weeks ago, I would have also been quite. It was heavy to just be in these groups as well. But yeah, it was. We were glad to be there, and happy to support the fact that we were able to hold the room, especially when they needed it the most.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. And I completely, appreciate that you would want to keep the confidentiality, maintain the confidentiality of people who turned up at these support groups. But just so I understand it better, these were physical spaces, right? Like people actually saw each other's faces and turned up to a particular place, or were they online spaces?
This was primarily online, and the reason why we wanted to keep it online is we saw people show up from different small parts and cities and towns, and them saying that maybe they did not have the resources to show up at, like, the protest and things like that. So these were physical spaces, and to again protect confidentiality, we told them, you can switch off your cameras, you can change your names, you don't have to reveal your names, because this was a sensitive space to be at. We felt like online was the best medium to do it, so that you don't have to, like, answer to too many people when it comes to sort of. So you had people take these calls from different parts as well, where they didn't have to look, sort of go and answer. So these were primarily online spaces where people joined across the country. We had people from at least 25 cities who had signed up for these support groups.
And I think,
no, sorry,
yeah,
go
just
on.
to add, I think I would say like our generation, like the Gen Zs and stuff, like especially because we've experienced so much of the post-COVID era, a lot of it has shifted online. You'd be surprised like how much people prefer online over offline for like mental health resources. So yeah, I think we just wanted to make it more accessible that way.
No, absolutely. Makes sense. I mean, of course, getting to Jantar Mantar or not getting to Jantar Mantar in itself has been sitting heavy for on so many people's minds. Like just not being able to be present in one of these moments that they thought was historic would change a lot of things. And I just want to kind of take you back to something, Sagar, that you said about how, people turned up at these spaces and said, why couldn't we do this? We were a generation prior, 2 generations prior, 6 generations prior. Like, why couldn't we do this? And since you've been at this for 5 years, I just want to ask you, was there a tipping point? I mean, paper leak after paper leak, high unemployment levels, the kind of pressures that school kids face, the kind of pressures that college students face, universities kind of becoming these spaces which not necessarily encourage critical thought. I mean, it was like a poly crisis, from every angle. So was it a tipping point? I mean, if the same tipping point had probably, if the previous generation had reached this tipping point, the possibility of them taking to the streets would have probably been very high.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I have thought about it, and I do think why it came to the tipping point that it did was you saw maybe the CBSE thing, the NEET thing, and in a lot of them, in a lot of these spaces, you saw young 17-year-olds showing the government that, hey, I could hack your website and I could show you that these are the gaping gaps that exist in the system. And when you saw Gen Z taking agency and saying, you know what, I will take agency and I will show you that there are problems in this. And what I would also argue is that Gen Zs are standing on the shoulders of the millennials and the generations that came previous to that. Like, the reason why they're able to be this fearless is because India has grown. India has become is now one of the fastest growing economies in the world. All of that, like, everything's political and economical as well, right? Like, we are a more confident generation in general, and that's because we don't have the weight or baggage of the previous generations, or feeling the inferiority complex that a lot of the previous generations felt. So I feel like a lot of that added to the fact that they were able to take that agency and able to sort of show up to the streets. And of course, like if you see the existence of the Cockroach Janta Party as well, were because it was almost an insult, right? Like there was an insult, almost whatever, like they could say that the Chief Justice words were misconstrued or whatever it must be, but it hit a nerve. And that nerve became into a movement because the unemployment in like we are almost reaching like record highs when it comes to like unemployment, especially amongst the well-educated folks, not the ones who are not educated. Like if you see the numbers, there's a huge disparity. So you're much more likely to not get a job if you're actually educated and have a degree as compared to say 10th 12th, because your standards and your expectations and the quality of the jobs that you would require become much higher if you are educated, and those jobs apparently simply don't exist. So when you see the frustrations of a generation sort of come to that tipping point, and you see that okay, the nation seems to be progressing and like things are seeming to progress, but I seem to be stuck here in this particular space. And I think that's how this generation got to the tipping point. And there were multiple sort of events, right? Like the CBSE the website hack that happened, then the need paper, then the CJI saying cockroaches. So I think all of that culminated into this sort of movement that the Gen Z could get behind and sort of show up for these protests as well.
Right. Neelika, I just want you to comment a little bit on, how your relationship with the people you collaborate with has been. So you collaborate with psychologists, presumably clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health professionals. What have they been telling you about how the situation has been, especially with respect to the protesters? And just to keep in mind that the protests, of course, happened in Jantar Mantar, which everybody saw, but then they also happened across many cities and towns. So if you can just comment a little bit about the relationship, and I feel like that's important because we'll get to know how mental health professionals are looking at this from their lens.
Yeah. I think for us, what's been most important is that firstly, the mental health professionals from their end, they're like, this is a crisis for the country. So what they do for us is that our model is that we don't charge anything to the students. However, we want to make sure that the mental health professionals and the therapists are compensated for. So what they do in return for that is sometimes they'll be like, okay, we see that there's such high demand. We're happy to like give you the rates at a subsidized rate and things like that. So I feel like that way they've been like very cooperative. And in terms of their experience with the students, I think we initially started off by thinking we wanted to do one support group to help, because we were like, okay, we have limited resources and funds. But then the mental health professionals, they themselves said, they're like, given the situation, we think more people would want to sign up for another session. Even during the session, a lot of people said that we would like to come again. And that's when we realized, okay, this is not something that would be solved by just having one support group, which is why we also had like a parallel free therapy thing going on. And then we also had a second support group that we did. And actually, in this coming week, we're going to meet with the therapists again to do a pulse check on, okay, like now that one of the demands has been fulfilled, like what's the sense like, is there enough demand, should we do another support group? And yeah, that's kind of how like we go about these things. So yeah, I would say like it's been great collaborating with them.
Absolutely. No, I'm very glad you brought up this idea of a follow-up. And those of us who work closely with mental health professionals, we totally understand how important follow-up is, because it's not like you have fever and you take a medicine and you're okay the next day. There is a long kind of a process that one has to go through. And especially when we saw, statements being made from the Cockroach Janta Party spokesperson that FIRs have, there's no written guarantee that the FIRs would be withdrawn. And younger people and their entire lives will kind of depend on whether these FIRs are withdrawn or not. I mean, there's so much at stake. So I feel like this follow-up really is extremely crucial. But the other thing I wanted to kind of bounce off to you, Sagar, is also, can we talk a little bit about the lead up to this? I mean, yes, paper leaks, of course, bad. I mean, no doubt. I don't think there's anybody who's trying to defend that. But just the general sense that students have been feeling in university spaces. So I, I went to Delhi University in the mid 2000s, and for us, the entire university space was a space where there was a lot of dialogue and discussion. They would encourage reading. I mean, of course, we had the internet, but then there was also so much the social media, but then there was also so much of time being spent in the libraries. But everything seems to have changed really in the last 15 odd years. So if you can talk a little bit of that and the impact of how university spaces have changed, and maybe if you want to talk specifically about engineering colleges, considering you went to engineering colleges, the change in the physical and the ecosystem, and that causing stressors to the younger population.
No, that's a great question. And why we started Citta, when me and Neelika started Citta as well, we still remember the first presentation that we ever made in 2019, that is. And I still remember the second slide. The second slide was just newspaper cuttings out of, student suicides. And our country having one of the worst student suicide rates in the world. And that's not by mistake. There is a systemic issue that exists, and this crosses any political lines for that matter. This has been something that's been mulling and building over a period of time. And this is especially when it comes to like competitive exams like engineering and medical, where there is just so much pressure put on students. You have these coaching centers that have cropped up in Kota, Vizag, all of these places that are actually pressure cookers. That there's no better way to sort of mention them, that these are pressure cookers, and if you come out great, if you don't, nobody really cares. And that's not how you treat the young population, and that's not how you say that there are only two options, and if you succeed, this is how you go ahead. And especially for the ones who don't have the kind of privilege that backgrounds, where if they don't get into a government aided college, or be it engineering or medical, they don't have the option of going to a private college. They will have to settle for something lesser, and that does mean that their family goes through the cycle of poverty, or through the cycle of being in that same socioeconomic strata all over again. And if in poor economics also, I remember Banerjee and Duflo mentioning that kids being looked at economic investments. Like they're like, oh, if there are 4 kids, we're going to try and zero in on 1 or 2 and try and see if these are our lottery tickets to get out of the cycle of poverty. And that's just too much pressure on one individual. And that's why you see the student suicides, right? Like the premise of this protest was the 21 lives that were lost just because another exam had to be given. That's, for a 17 or an 18-year-old, that's immense amount of pressure. And it had been building up for a while. We had been seeing it in engineering colleges. We went to a private college, me and Neelika. So the first conversation that you have in a private college, especially in the first year, is, oh, why couldn't you get into IIT? What happened? What happened in your JEE score that you're going to end up here? Like, there will always be a story, right? Like, because you might have scored great in your 12th grades, but like something happened in JEE, which is why you're here. Because otherwise, everybody wants to be in the same institute. So, but these were people with privilege, so they could afford a reasonable fee in a private engineering college and could make through. But there are so many students I know who had to take a BSc degree or had to go somewhere else because they couldn't afford a private BTech degree. So you do see that there were frustrations that were building up. And what happened now is, because even after a private engineering college, your jobs are not guaranteed. Like when we sort of graduated, this was just right before COVID. So it was still slightly better. But I do see after COVID and say the AI wave coming in, employment has become such a big issue with, like, say, private, even after after graduating, there is absolutely zero guarantee as to whether you're going to get an entry-level job or not. Usually, initially, Infosys or TCS would absorb you, and then you would sort of try and build your career from there, like the mass recruiters. That's not happening anymore at the scale that it used to. So I think all of these factors have built up, And now students have gotten frustrated because they're like, we did everything you asked us to do. You told us to go to school, you told us to get a degree, and where are the jobs? I have tried over so many times. We have tried to apply to so many places, and I know this because I'm in education. I speak to these kids. I know the kind of frustration that they come from. So it was completely justified for them to come on the streets and say, you know what, we don't know what's happening. And this was not just the NEET leak. This was a lot of collective frustrations that have built up over time. And the speed of jobs or employment not coming through as quickly. So yeah.
Yeah, no, again, absolutely. Totally see those points. And one maybe last question before we wrap this up. A lot of these protests, rightly so, were about the exam paper leaks. They were also about, unemployment rates. But a lot of people who turned up to Jantar Mantar ended up asking other questions, ended up asking questions like, why can't we raise questions? Like, why can't we ask uncomfortable questions to those people in power? These were kind of broader themes that were emerging. And those of us who interviewed enough people on the ground could see these themes emerging, right? Like people from smaller towns and cities would come to Delhi and say, but we want to ask these questions. Like, yes, of course, unemployment, but also, what about the fact that there is shrinking space to be ourselves, sexual minorities or religious minorities and things like that. So these were kind of broader based. And, in your conversations, let's say within the support groups or with the mental health professionals, have these themes come up again and again? And if they have, then can you just elaborate a little bit on what has come up the most?
Yeah, and I that's a great question, because these themes did come up in the support group itself. And while the support group acknowledged that the protest did start because of the NEET leaks, but they felt like just the country reached a tipping point in terms of censorship, in terms of just censorship of critical thought. There was a lot of 1984 references being thrown across. And I think for the first time, the collective emotion that I was talking about, I think for the first time, people felt like they could express themselves, like they could freely express themselves. So everything that was sort of stuck up for so many years, everything was just sort of coming out, because it felt like there's this small window where it feels like it's acceptable to sort of express everything that you've been feeling. So I might as well get everything out, because we don't know when we'll get this window of opportunity again. But they had the awareness. They're not like, oh, everything's not going to change, because they know India is a complex place. It's not, they didn't feel like we're a small country, which is, they were not myopic in the way they looked at it, but they felt like they had a small window of opportunity. So they did want to express everything that they felt like. So I felt like the censorship was such a critical point in the support group, where they felt like even now that there was some sort of hesitancy. They're like, what if this impacts the way recruiters see me or people see me? Because what if they think I am this what do you say, Andolan Jeevi or Krantikari? Like, you don't want those tags to be stuck up on you, because they're like, oh, maybe other people will not look at me favorably. If I go into conversations, friends might not speak to me. So when they felt like it was safe to sort of express themselves, is why they sort of all of these issues started coming out. And you see issues from all spectrums. It's not all the right issues. There are also, like, if you see the crop up of issues that have come up after the protest, there are a lot of questionable ones as well that have come up. But suddenly people feel like there is some sort of freedom of speech that's coming back. But you can see the crackdown as well. But I think Gen Z is trying to push back as much as they can. And the older generations also recognize this in the support group, where they felt like we were so numb. Like we kept quiet, because that's, after a point we decided that maybe this is how it is. But Gen Z had not seen, say, like when they were like, they've never seen the Congress days. Like, they've only seen like a regime that was like this. So then they're like, no, you know what, we want better. And because they have the exposure to, say, Western media, and they know what freedom of speech looks like, they're like, we want this for ourselves as well.
And I think another very important thing is that we're in a generation of social media. We're not relying just on mainstream media. We can put our point of views across through that. So that's why you would see our prime minister coming on Instagram and making a statement, rather than going to the news channels. If it were a different generation, he would have probably selected that as the medium of expressing his thought. So I feel like that kind of empowers people. Like, you know how they say you can use it in like a good way and a bad way. So like that's the reason I feel like the Gen Zs have been more fearless. They're able to get their voices out, and like everyone going into the protest, like the kind of reels they made, and you know, it's like those quiet, like it's the like, you know, I'm not going to take it seriously, but I also want you to know that this is very serious. I feel like that was the best theme that came out through this. And like, I would say, like, I'm very proud that, you know, like I live in a different country now. I'm in Canada, and we have protests here as well. So people here, they'll take out their boom boxes, they play music, they feel like it's a free place where they can protest. And I feel like, you know, we see that, and a lot, it's like a very global generation we're living in. So when people have access to that, they're like, why can't we do this in our country? It's a democracy. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's like another sentiment out there.
No, yeah, and it was beautiful. I mean, Jantar Mantar was beautiful in various ways. And one theme that came up again and again was that people felt cathartic. It felt like they had a lot boiled up and a lot kind of bottled in, and they just came to Jantar Mantar and everything kind of spilt out. Although, you know, one theme that, you know, came up again and again, everybody said we are here regardless of religion and gender and caste and things like that. And you know, we are not here, there's no fear, like women can walk around, and you know, all of these themes came up again and again, which was very heartening to see. But there are deeper issues in I mean, Sagar, you have an education startup, and you know this, there are deeper issues, you know, for instance, that came up in Hyderabad Central University after Rohit Vemula. Issues of caste, issues of discrimination, and issues of, you know, substance abuse. And these are kind of issues that I'm sure will keep you occupied for a very long time to come. But in terms of the protest, did any of these ever turn up in any of the sessions that you held, where somebody came and said, look, all is fine, but I have this, you know, burning issue that I want to discuss with the therapist?
While I think those are very pertinent issues, and it didn't come up in the support group as a clear theme, because I think, as I said, this was right after the Lathi charge that happened in Jantar Mantar. So I felt like all of us were then sort of feeling those emotions, feeling like what just happened and how do we sort of process this. And But I do see those emotions coming up in general. And very interestingly, what you do see, and maybe they are being slightly myopic in the way they're thinking about it. You see offset of the Cockroach Janta Party in this Instagram page that has come up saying Reservation Hatao movement or something, and it has garnered 5.8 million followers. While I think what they stand for is almost, I don't want to say things, but like casteism is so deeply rooted. But these are individuals who have been born probably in privileged families, in upper caste families, and don't understand what it means to actually come from a Dalit family, and what kind of atrocities that they still have to go through, be it in at school levels or at high school levels or in college as well. So you do see, but the reason why it comes is because the system is so broken that we don't have enough seats to accommodate everybody and give everybody a quality chance at a decent education. And as you rightly mentioned, there are just much deeper issues that need to sort of be addressed. But I think it was important for this protest to have anchors, and they felt like we will choose the safe anchors. And because if we choose the safe anchors, we will be able to get bigger numbers and get more people to rally behind. But I'm happy that now the conversations will shift more about how do you address these systemic issues and try to dismantle them and move forward, as we try and maybe change the system incrementally, because I don't think radical change can happen in a country like India.
Right. No, thank you so much for this. Are there any last thoughts? Do you want to, you know, end this with something that you've really been sitting on and something that you want to share with our audiences?
So I just feel like Chitta's tagline is called "You've got this," and I think me and Neelika have been talking about this before this protest, is that we've been moving towards a dialogue where we feel like the reason why we wanted to keep the support group is because we realized that while therapy is one way to seek help, but help looks so different in different spaces. And we felt like at this particular moment, it's so important for us to be together and for us to come together. And I feel like mental health also needs to be communal, also needs to have more people sitting together, especially when you're feeling collectively similar emotions. So how do you share that in a space? So we want to tell that help looks different for different people. And whenever you do feel like you want to seek help, you should know that there is somebody out there. There are organizations like us that are waiting, and we're happy to help. And we hope to serve young Indians for a very long time to come.
Sounds
Yeah.
great.
And if I could add something, it would just be that for Citta, like the future we see is that like we would actually be happy. Sometimes Saga and I, we talk about this. Like certain companies, they want to increase demand. We actually want to decrease demand. Like we want to make sure that like in the sense like accessibility, yes, but like we'd want where people actually have these infrastructures in their institutions itself. Like I've done like my MBA here at University of Toronto, and I see like there's such a good infrastructure around mental health. They don't need to go to private institutions. There's like insurance coverages and things like that. So I think at some point we want Citta to also enter the policy field where we're actually able to make mental health like a broader conversation and more accessible. And we want more like people coming in to help and just like have the demand supply be equal and make sure that people are getting the help that they really require and that they're open to getting this help in the first place.
That's great, Neelika. Thank you so much, Sagar. Thank you so much, Neelika. We will share links to your Instagram page, and we hope to be able to have these conversations again, maybe about specific themes in the future. But thanks a lot for joining us this time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great